From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We've got a big guest with us today, Dr. Marc Siegel. You might know him from Fox News. He'll be joining to talk about his new book called Miracles Amongst Us that looks at miracles across the board, things that are happening in today's world that might surprise you. We'll also be joined by one of my favorite guests, Mike Aquilina, to talk about one of my favorite feast days, that is, of course, St. Patrick's Day, coming right up with the O apostrophe in my last name. You can only imagine that I enjoy this holiday. And his book, St. Patrick and His World, is one of the best I've come across that talks about the great saint, St. Patrick. So we'll be excited to talk to Mike in just a little bit. Check out my series, They Might Be Saints, which airs weekly on EWTN. Coming right up, we have an episode on March 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. They Might Be Saints looks at Venerable Mother Maria Calpus. In the sainthood cause for Venerable Mother Maria Calpus, the founder of the Sisters of St. Casimir, looks at her inspirational work in education and healthcare that led many to seek her intercession before God on their behalf. So check that one out. They Might Be Saints, Venerable Mother Maria Calpus, on March 22nd at 1:30 p.m. And check out my Explorer episode on St. Patrick. On Saturday, March 14th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, we look at St. Patrick's Ireland. I journey across the Emerald Isle to uncover sacred sites, ancient legends, and miraculous moments where the legacy of St. Patrick continues to shape a nation's faith. And that's Saturday, May 14th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. We look at St. Patrick's Ireland in this next episode of Explorer. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the Might Be Saint of the Day. For today, we've got Blessed Giacomo Cusmano from 1834 to 1888. He lived in Palermo in Italy. In the 365 Days with Mary project, where we look at the Marian devotion that lines up exactly to the day's date. For today's date, March 14th, we've got the icon of the Mother of God enthroned from Kolomsky in Russia in the year 1917. In the question of the week, what was the last approved Marian apparition? Was it Kibeho in Rwanda? I'll try to shed some light on that one in just a little bit. And the miracle of the day relates to St. Matilda of Saxony and the miracles that happened at her gravesite. Let's take a look at miracle news. We do this every week where we talk about the miracles happening all around the world and those people and things that relate to miracles. And for people who miss these, you can connect to the Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter. Also, my Instagram feed for Miracle Hunter covers these as well. But we always try to post the new things that are popping up around the world, big and small. And there was an interesting story that was recently related out of Syracuse, that there was a new miracle on the Hudson. And I think everyone out there knows about the miracle on the Hudson that happened some decades ago now, which related to the improbable landing of a passenger plane on the Hudson River, where everybody on the plane survived. And so there's been headlines that have been coming up about another miracle on the Hudson. A small plane crashed on the Hudson River in Newburgh, New York on this past Monday night, according to the Federal Aviation Administration, and 2 people were on board the Cessna 172 when it made an ice landing around 8 p.m., the FAA said. And the pilot and passenger both survived with minor injuries, the governor said. Another miracle on the Hudson, thank God. Thank God both the passenger of the single-engine plane that performed an ice landing near Nuremberg have been located with only minor injuries. Grateful for our first responders for their quick actions, Hochul said in a statement. And according to WABC, first responders located the plane quickly, and the 2 occupants were able to swim to shore. And Middle Hope Fire Department officials said both were evaluated at the scene right before being taken to the hospital, and they're expected to make a full recovery. So that's an amazing thing that we have a second miracle on the Hudson. In other miracle news, an Arizona child was declared dead in a pool from drowning, suddenly showed signs of life hours later and survives. And a child was declared dead after drowning in a residential pool in the Phoenix suburbs last month, who remarkably and miraculously perhaps showed signs of life hours later and is expected to survive. And this child, whose name and age have not been yet released, was found unresponsive in a backyard pool at a home in Gilbert, Arizona on February 8th. And Gilbert police and fire officials responded to reports of the drowning at 5:35 p.m. First responders administered life-saving efforts at the scene and rushed the victim to a nearby hospital where the child was declared dead less than an hour later. And a news broadcast showing a subdivision entrance at night is linked to this story. A child showing signs of life after drowning. The child showed these signs of life hours after being declared dead, and just before 11:30 p.m. the same night, the child started showing signs of life. They were airlifted to another Phoenix area hospital for further treatment, and police assured us that the child is expected to survive in spite of the death declaration. While his distraught parents were saying their goodbyes at his bedside, he started to move, and he sustained an ischemic spine injury during cardiac arrest and lost the ability to move his legs, but he slowly has learned to walk again. And that's the miracle news coming out of Arizona and out of New York this past week. Two big-time miracle stories that I've posted to the Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week where we ask a trivia question and give out a prize to an emailer who writes in the fastest with the correct answer. And last week we asked the question, what was the first miracle in the history of the United States that was recognized by the Vatican? And it might be worth pausing to say that, not every miracle that's looked at in the United States is recognized by the Vatican. Even the Marian apparition from 1859 with Adele Bryce in Champion, Wisconsin, the Marian apparition there, it's been recognized by the local bishop, but the Vatican has never commented on it in any kind of a way, so we can't consider it approved by Rome necessarily. And so, and all sorts of other miracles happen all the time, but Rome does not comment on those. So it has to be one that's connected to a sainthood cause. And so the very first sainthood cause from a miracle in the United States relates to St. Peter Claver. And this miracle involved Ignatius Strecker. He was a German immigrant born in St. Louis, who suffered a severe chest infection after a workplace injury. And in 1864, after a doctor said he probably had weeks to live, he went to pray at the shrine of St. Joseph and venerated a relic of St. Peter Claver, presented by the Jesuit missionary Francis Xavier Westinger. And soon after, Strecker experienced a sudden and complete recovery that physicians could not explain, and the case was carefully investigated and recognized by church authorities as miraculous. And in 1887, the Vatican officially approved the healing as a miracle attributed to St. Peter Claver's intercession. And this miracle helped lead to Claver's canonization in 1888 by Pope Leo XIII. And that was the first miracle in the history of the United States. Nobody wrote in with that correct answer. Maybe that one was a little bit too tricky. But the question for this week, before becoming the famous missionary bishop of Ireland, St. Patrick was captured as a teenager and taken to Ireland as a slave. Now, according to Patrick's own writings, what specific job was he forced to do during his 6 years of captivity? We're going to be talking about St. Patrick on today's show, so this is a perfect question. So again, what specific job was Patrick doing during his 6 years of captivity as a slave? If you think you know that answer, want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe you'll be the fastest one with the right answer. Answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Dr. Marc Siegel about his brand new book, Miracles Amongst Us. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. People have this idea when they talk about miracles that these are only these very rare things that happen. And perhaps they go through this very strict and stringent process of the Catholic Church or otherwise, where miracles are investigated and only a few of them pass muster. And that is true. But the idea that miracles never happen anywhere except in those very rare cases, I think, is wrong. Miracles are happening each and every day all around the world. Miracles happen. There are miracles amongst us, as we might say. And that's the title of a new book from Dr. Marc Siegel, Miracles Amongst Us. And that is you of course, know him from places like Fox News and elsewhere. And he's got this brand new book that delves into numerous stories of miracles that he's run into in his life as a doctor and otherwise. And we welcome to the program today, Dr. Marc Siegel.
Great to be on with you, Michael. Miracles Among Us came from, actually, I think it was most inspired by Cardinal Dolan, who's now retired. But when I talked to him about this issue you brought up, miracles, flash of lightning from the sky, blind men seeing again, he said, of course, all of that is true, but and extremely powerful. But there's an idea that it doesn't have to exclude medical intervention, that there are things called soft miracles where there's a sign of divine intervention and also great doctoring or great, I call it a miracle lane, where you start having a compilation of coincidences, where a miracle grows, kind of like Aaron's staff in the Old Testament, where seeds turn into acorns, and then so miracles can evolve and grow. And after all, great physicians and the art of medicine is the hands of God. So they're not mutually exclusive. So whereas the church will try to confirm a miracle by showing there's no other way this could have happened besides direct intervention, it's not medically possible. Of course I believe in that, and it's incredibly profound. But there are also miracles that occur by a combination of faith and science.
Absolutely. I think that's God working through the hands of a physician can be its own miracle. And we might, I like to differentiate between capital M miracles and lowercase m miracles, the ones that have that full investigation of the church, and then there are others that happen each and every day all around us. And when we talk about your book, Miracles Among Us, what inspired you as a physician to write this book, to go down this path?
Well, you partly inspired me, and I have quoted you multiple times in that book, and you're a great inspiration to your listeners. I also was inspired by the idea that Spinoza was wrong when he said in the 16th century that God appears in nature, but there's no personal God. And I think the Catholic Church believes he's wrong. I believe he's wrong. And if you ask physicians, over 70% have faith, and over 70% believe in miracles, and 55% believe they've seen them in their own practice, where somebody defies the odds. And one of the things that inspired me, and I'll put this in the next book, I didn't put this in this book, was an event that occurred where I was in an ICU as a very young doctor, and a patient who had hit his head was in a deep coma for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the family was at the bedside night and day praying for him. And they would come to me, and I was just an intern, and they would come to me and say, look, his blood pressure is going up. Look, his eyelids are fluttering. And we would be like, we feel so sorry for this family. And we're like, this is going to be our careers of constantly dispelling false hope. Well, you know what happened? After a month or two, he got up suddenly, woke up, and walked out of the hospital. I said, well, that's going to be my career, to not count people out, to honor the preciousness of each human soul.
Now, that's incredible. We're talking today with Dr. Marc Siegel about his new book, The Miracles Among Us. And as a practicing physician and medical commentator, how do you balance this idea of appropriate scientific skepticism, but also openness to the possibility of miracles?
I think they inform each other. I think that if you believe in God and you see God's fingerprints on what you're doing as a physician, you're more inclined to not give up and to really be inspired to do your work. So I don't see them as mutually exclusive at all. And I think that the stories I tell in the Miracles Among Us and the stories I'm accumulating now inform this, because it's you can have a healthy skepticism, but it doesn't change the miracle ongoing. I mean, there's a great story in there about Robert Redfield's son, the former CDC director. He has two sons. One son hits his head and is in a deep coma, and it doesn't look like he's going to ever wake up. And Jack Sava up at Maryland Shock Trauma says, well, they never wake up from this, but I don't think that him waking up was necessarily great, direct divine intervention. But Bobby Redfield, who is the former CDC director's son, and a transplant surgeon says, well, wait a minute, I saw his CAT scan, and the front of his brain was crushed pretty much, and they had to put on a whole nother skull, and there's no way he wakes up, and he ends up not only waking up, but goes back on the golf course and outdoes his other scores. And there's a very funny scene in the book where Redfield is sitting in a cafeteria with Danny, and he says to him, something's wrong with your eyes, Danny. And Danny says, I actually can't see out of one eye, Dad. So Dr. Redfield goes back to God and says, you promised me a full recovery. Well, 2 weeks later, Danny can see completely out of both eyes. And I said to Redfield, you criticized the Lord? And Redfield said, of course. It's a personal God. I pray to a personal God. And that's what John Paul II, the Pope, said to him. You know, everyone has a personal God. It's not just the God in nature that Spinoza was talking about. We all can invoke via prayer, via intercession, God. And God decides which miracles he gives, of course, not us. God decides.
Absolutely. We're talking today with Dr. Marc Siegel about the brand new book, The Miracles Among Us. And I think this is always an important question as an author when you dig into a topic, perhaps even a new topic. How did the research and writing of this book, The Miracles Among Us, change the way that you maybe speak with patients about illnesses, recovery, resilience, and what did you learn sort of in the process?
I listen more carefully to my patients. What do they believe in? How much do they believe? How much courage do they have? Because I think courage correlates with miracles. What are their beliefs? Do they have faith in me? Do they have faith in God? Do they have faith in the process of healing? What is healing? Healing's not a healing of the body alone. It's also healing of the spirit. I have a great scene that, again, will be in the next book, which is of a woman who meets me on the street. I'm carrying a sign that says, "Bring me your miracles." A woman says, 2 ENT surgeons told me that I needed major sinus surgery, but the night before I visited my priest. And while I'm talking to him at a healing center, I hear a voice, go see Scully, go see Scully, go see Scully. I said, who's Scully? She says, that's my primary care doctor I was never going to see because he doesn't know anything about sinuses. But when I went to see him the following day, he taps my sinuses and he says, they're fine. You don't need surgery. Have a Benadryl at night. And she does, and she's completely fine. God healed her. And God healed her through that vision and that voice and the priest. And having faith, can cause you to avoid going down certain rabbit holes.
And when you wrote this book, Miracles Among Us, what was your hope? And what is your hope, having finished it and gone through the process of interviewing all these miracle recipients and telling their incredible stories, Catholic stories and otherwise, make it into this book? What is your hope for people who maybe are going through some difficult health challenges now or are down in their luck or feeling depressed? What message can people glean from this book that you hope
that
for?
The miracles are there every day. You may not be seeing them. You may be missing them. Look a little bit harder, and they'll uplift you from your doldrums, from your despair. Look for the miracle you're not expecting. Don't say, oh, that happened, but let me move on. Tell you a quick example from the book. The Rebbe, the great Rebbe, Menachem Schneerson, there's a miracle in the book of how he leads to the healing of a young child who has a hole in his heart, and the doctors don't believe him, and he just keeps persisting, and he ends up helping to cure the child. But on the way, the child is the young son of a carpenter that works for the Rebbe, and the carpenter looks out the window one day while he's repairing the Rebbe's residence, and he sees a woman walking along to go babysit the next door, and he just can't stop thinking about her, and he ends up marrying her. Well, the Rebbe ended up very sick, and my wife was one of the last people that took care of him before I ever met her. And she said to me very early on when I met her that she felt that the light was gone from his eyes and he had no more miracles left to give, even though people kept coming to him for miracles. And as I was writing the book, Michael, I realized something, that actually meeting my wife may have been the rabbi's last miracle, because I married her about a month after she had last seen the Rebbe. I met her. And I in the process of writing, I uncovered a miracle that I had never even thought of.
That is amazing. And your book is chock full of various miracle stories, big and small, of people who have had life-changing experiences of miracles among us. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Marc Siegel, for joining us to talk about your fascinating new book, Miracles Among Us.
The Miracle Hunter, you are an inspiration to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that is Dr. Marc Siegel talking to us about his brand new book, Miracles Among Us. And this is a big-time book. This is available anywhere you buy your books, Amazon and otherwise. So check this one out, Miracles Among Us from Dr. Marc Siegel. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show. This is Michael O'Neill and the Miracle Hunter. I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I love getting questions in the email inbox. Those are always fun, and I have a pretty strange and interesting email inbox, as you might imagine. But I really like answering questions in person, and I travel around the country 10 or 20 times a year, and I go to different parishes or events or conferences, and I talk about miracles, of course. I talk about Eucharistic miracles or Marian apparitions or sainthood causes and how the Church investigates the supernatural. And people can invite me to their parish or their event. If you go on the website, miraclehunter.com, and click on the Contact tab, you can send me a message that way. And maybe I'll be speaking at a parish or event in your area sometime soon. So the question from this week was a good one. It says, Dear Miracle Hunter, I am using miraclehunter.com for research, and I need some help with navigating the site. I'm trying to make a list of all the approved apparitions. Does it end with Kabeho in Rwanda in 1981? Many thanks, Emily. Well, thank you, Emily, for your question. And it's an interesting one. We might imagine that Marian apparitions happen all the time, and perhaps they do, but the kind that have been fully recognized by Rome are very rare. And we talk about those happening going back to St. Juan Diego in 1531, or Lourdes in 1858, or Fatima in 1917, or Kabeho in Rwanda, 1981. Believe it or not, even though many years have passed since those events following the Rwandan genocide, those apparitions in 1981 are the very last ones that have some form of recognition from Rome as supernatural. And it is true, however, that there have been other Marian apparitions that have happened since then. And we can point to San Nicolas in Argentina, or a few others that have occurred over the decades. But those have been only approved by the local bishop. And Cuapa is another one that comes to mind. But those have been only approved by the local bishop. We haven't seen any that have been approved by Rome. And yes, the answer to your question, Emily, is yes. The most recent occurring Marian apparition approved by Rome as supernatural is, in fact, Kabeho in Rwanda. And we might say, well, will we see again someday the Vatican weighing in on a Marian apparition and calling it supernatural? Well, it doesn't seem to be the case that either a bishop or Rome will ever declare something to be supernatural again as it relates to a Marian apparition. And that seems like a very negative kind of statement from me, but I think it's probably true. We talk about the new norms that came out in 2024 that talk about how the Catholic Church investigates the supernatural. And in those norms, it seems like they have said that there are 6 new categories related to apparition approval. Previously, we had seen categories like a red, yellow, and green light, perhaps. A constate non supernaturalitate it is established as not supernatural. The middle category of non constat, which is not established, and constat, which is established as supernatural. The green light. Well, they've taken away the green light in the recent documents, so they can only give sort of a red light or a yellow light, or different shades in between those. But they no longer declare anything supernatural, except there's a tiny sentence in that document that says, if the Pope wants to, he can declare something supernatural. But there's no description about how that could happen. If there's a long study, or if the Pope wakes up with an extra strong cappuccino one morning and says, I'm going to approve this one, we have no idea how it's possible that it could happen. So, but the local bishop, who used to be the one in charge of declaring apparitions approved and condemned, well, he doesn't have that ability anymore anyway to declare anything approved. So I'm not quite sure how it would ever happen that we would have another Guadalupe, Lourdes, or Fatima. Well, I'd love to see it happen someday. And Mary can make that happen, and we can see what Rome does with it. But as of right now, we won't see any more approved Marian apparitions. And so, Emily, thanks for your question. So the Cabejo apparitions from 1981, maybe they are the last apparitions of all time that will have Vatican recognition and approval. So thanks for your question, Emily. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe I'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week, where we talk about a Marian devotion that lines up exactly to the day's date. You all know Guadalupe, December 12th, or Fatima, May 13th, or Lourdes, February 11th. But believe it or not, on each and every day of the calendar year, there's a different other Marian devotion from somewhere around the world that lines up exactly to the day's date. And so we've got celebrations of feast days, big miracles that have happened, the building of basilicas on a certain date, a consecration of a basilica, other ways that Mary's honored throughout the world. But there's one for each and every day. There's at least one for every day of the calendar year. So for today's day, we've got the icon of the Mother of God enthroned from Kolomoskaya in Russia in the year 1917. The story goes that the enthroned or reigning icon of the Mother of God appeared on March 5th, 1917. And that was March 2nd on the old calendar, in the day of Tsar Nicholas's abdication in the village of Kolomoskaya near Moscow. In February of 1917, an elderly woman named Adokia saw the Mother of God in a dream, telling her to go to Kolomoskaya to find a large blackened icon in the church. And after the vision was repeated 3 times, she went there to search for the icon. In the basement of the church, covered to dust the icon of Parankanada, the seated type, was revealed, and news of the icon's discovery spread throughout Russia. And there were several healing miracles. And that's the 365 Days with Mary project for today, the icon of the Mother of God enthroned from Kolomoskaya in Russia in the year 1917. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week, where we try to find a miracle that's happened on the day's date in some year in Christian history. And today's miracle stems from the year 1968. And the miracle is that St. Matilda of Saxony died on March 14th, 1968, at the monastery she founded at Quedlinburg Abbey after years devoted to prayer and charity. And medieval chroniclers describe that right at her burial, pilgrims began visiting her tomb, seeking her intercession. And one account reports that a blind man regained his sight praying at her grave, and another tradition recounts that a crippled man was able to walk again after touching the tomb and invoking Matilda's prayers. And other pilgrims were said to have experienced healings from fevers and serious illnesses while praying there. And these reported miracles helped establish Matilda's reputation for holiness and led to her enduring veneration as a saint in the Catholic Church. And that's today's miracle of the day for St. Matilda of Saxony. Let's take a look at the sainthood news. We do this every week, where we talk about miracles happening all around the world and those things that boost people going forward to becoming saints. And of course, in the sainthood process, there are 4 steps where you go from servant of God to venerable to blessed, and another miracle boosts your head to be a saint. So each month or so, I'd say it probably is more like 3 months, the church comes out with some new venerables, blesseds, and saints, and they make a decree that comes out through the dicastery for the causes of saints. And so the latest one that came out on Saturday, February 21st, the Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, received an audience His Eminence Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, the prefect for the dicastery for the causes of saints. And during this audience, the Pope authorized the same dicastery to promulgate a decree on the heroic virtues of the servant of God, Theophany Michael Kundalur. He's a professed priest of the Order of Friars Capuchin Minor, born on July 20th, 1913, in Katapuram in India, and he died on April 4th, 1968, in Ponoruni in India. And according to the website of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, or for the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, he was a professed priest of the orders of Friar Minor Capuchin, and he lived and bore witness to the faith exercised with fortitude, even in adversity. And he was nourished by prayer and Eucharistic adoration. He was steadfast in obedience to the Lord's will in every circumstance. He was docile to ecclesiastical authorities and his superiors, and he nurtured a profound love for others, dedicating himself with special attention to the care for the poorest, and lived intensely the spirit of poverty of St. Francis of Assisi. And so now Theophany, this priest, this Capuchin minor priest, will go on to be named venerable, and after this, one miracle will lead to him being named blessed. 2 miracles will lead to him being named a saint, and that is the sainthood news for today. And we always like to talk about might-be saints. We talk about the movement along the path from servant of God to venerable to blessed to saint, and that lines up to my television series, They Might Be Saints, which airs weekly on EWTN, and also my book, They Might Be Saints, which is available from EWTNRC.com, the EWTN Religious Catalog. I think it's my best one. In that book, we have 22 venerables and blesseds from the United States who are on this path to sainthood. But for today's date, the might-be saint of the day is from Italy, and he is Blessed Giacomo Cosimano, who lived from 1834 to 1888 in Palermo. And he was born on March 15th in 1834 in Palermo, and he was the 4th of 5 children born to Giacomo and Maddalena Cosimano. And his father worked as a surveyor, and the family was well off financially. Giacomo's mother died of cholera when the boy was 3. He was a pious child, eager for the religious instruction from his father, and showing concern for the poor. The family had to lock up clothes because he would give them away, and everything else in the closets to different beggars. And he was educated at Jesuit schools, became a physician, graduating from medical school in 1851, and he taught at that medical school at the University of Palermo. His father died in 1852, and Giacomo returned home to manage the family business and estate, and he still managed to continue his education and become a certified surgeon. But he felt a call to religious life, and he considered becoming a Capuchin friar, but his spiritual director recommended the priesthood, and he was ordained in 1860 in the Archdiocese of Palermo. He was devoted to penance, fasted often, and would sleep on a cross. Along with about 40 of his parishioners, he founded the missionary Servants of the Poor on May 12, 1867, and the Sisters, Servants of the Poor. And he died at 4:30 a.m. on March 14th in 1888 in Palermo, of natural causes following a severe bout of pleurisy. And he was declared venerable by Pope John Paul II in 1982, and Pope John Paul II beatified him in 1983 on October 30th. And he is today's might-be saint of the day, Blessed Giacomo Cosimano. With one more miracle, Giacomo Cosimano will be known as a saint. For people interested in the television series They Might Be Saints, it airs weekly on EWTN. On Sunday, March 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Central Time, the next episode of They Might Be Saints is about Venerable Mother Maria Calpus, and the cause for sainthood of Venerable Mother Maria Calpus, the founder of the Sisters of St. Casimir. We look at her inspirational work in education and healthcare, leading many to seek her intercession before God on their behalf. And that's Mother Maria Calpus, They Might Be Saints, coming up on Sunday, March 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. We need to take a short break, But when we come back, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite saints, St. Patrick, with Mike Aquilina in his new book, St. Patrick and His World. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Well, people know me. They know I'm an Irish guy with this O apostrophe in my last name, and our big holiday is coming up. Of course, the celebration of the feast day of St. Patrick. Around Chicago and anywhere there's a lot of Irish people. This is a big deal. And so he stands firm as one of my favorite saints. And one of my favorite books that I've ever read about St. Patrick and his life is this book called St. Patrick and His World. And it's written by prolific author Mike Aquilina. And we're so excited to have him back on the show to discuss one of my favorite saints. Welcome back to the program today, Mike.
Well, thanks for having me back, Michael.
Yeah, it's great to chat again, and excited about St. Patrick's Day as it is every year for me. But this book, St. Patrick and His World, is a great one. I love that you go into that background of one of the most beloved saints throughout the world, actually. And when you wrote this book, what was the inspiration for digging into all the history behind St. Patrick?
Well, I had written a book called St. Joseph and His World, and the difficulty with any devotion to St. Joseph is that he doesn't talk in the Gospels, all right? We don't have any words of St. Joseph. We have a few deeds, and that's it. So what I tried to do is to bring out more of St. Joseph's life by telling the historical context, explaining what was going on culturally and in society at the time of St. Joseph's life. Well, we have a similar problem with Patrick. We do have more words from Patrick than from Joseph, but we only have two works that are universletters accepted as authentic, as words of St. Patrick, and that is his Confessions and his letter to the soldiers of Coroticus. So those two documents are all we have to go on, at least if you're going to go strictly by what the scholars say. And so I wanted to draw out more about Patrick's life by giving the historical context and explaining, the situations that Patrick found in Ireland and how he responded to them.
And if we look at his confession specifically, what do we learn from those? And is Patrick's theology surprising in any way, or how would you characterize it?
Oh, I love the Confessions. Scholars make fun of it, translators make fun of it, because Patrick's Latin is so bad. As a matter of fact, Patrick constantly interrupts his narrative in order to apologize for his bad grammar. He was not a well-schooled author like St. Augustine or any of the other great fathers. He was someone who was kidnapped as a young man. He never got those later lessons on rhetoric and composition and so on. So he was writing kind of a rough Latin that was mostly cobbled together from Latin phrases he knew from the Bible as it was preached in the Mass. So he would just do this as kind of a ransom note, he's clipping out phrases from the Bible in order to construct sentences in his two letters, his Confession and his letter to the soldiers of Coroticus. I love that about Patrick, that there's a spontaneity about his work. There's a passion about his work. You have the sense that what he has written needed to be written. He just needed to say these things because they're so important, and because he loves Jesus, and because he wants the best for all the people who would read it or hear it down through the millennia. So that's what I love most about Patrick. That's what I love most about his writing, is its spontaneity and its passion.
And can we infer from the poor Latin that this means it's very likely to be an authentic document from Patrick?
Well, that's one of the reasons the scholars go by these texts, because the other things that are attributed to Patrick have good grammar. They don't read anything like these two documents. So people get suspicious immediately, even though they're written in, say, the spirit of Patrick. They're a little bit too perfect to be believable as Patrick's. But yes, these two, I think, are absolutely authentic, because there are certain phrases in Patrick's Latin text that have never really been translated. Nobody's ever been able to figure out what he's trying to say in these sentences, so they just left them as they were. And that's a sign of reverence for the original text. We can be sure, I think, that these are original, these are authentic, because nobody tried to translate those things. They said, nope, we got to leave them as they are. If these had been fabricated texts, they would have been changed many times.
Amazing. We're talking today with Mike Aquilina about his book, St. Patrick and His World, with St. Patrick's Day approaching shortly here. And Mike, as we talk about Patrick, I think one of the fascinating things about him is his rise to prominence.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how that happened exactly.
Well, you have to understand, Patrick begins his own story. He begins his memoir by explaining that he was kind of a lapsed Catholic teenager who had a bad attitude about religion and wasn't paying attention at school. And he kind of sounds like, just a typical adolescent in a lot of ways, and almost an American adolescent. You can just picture him rolling his eyes and saying, whatever. But he wasn't paying attention. So Patrick gets kidnapped by pirates, which is the worst thing that could happen, right? The pirates made an incursion. They took everything valuable out of the village, and one of the valuables they took was Patrick, and sold him into slavery. So he had lived in kind of small town aristocracy. He was fairly well off for the place where he lived. Now he found himself sold into slavery in Ireland, where it was cold and he had no shelter. He had poor clothing, and he didn't have much to eat. And he was made to guard the sheep in all kinds of weather, in snow and rain, and you name it, in high heat. So he was really brought low, and there he remembered the lessons that his parents had tried to teach him, and his teachers had tried to instill in him the lessons about prayer. He remembered his prayers. Those seeds were planted well by his parents and by his teachers. They didn't seem to be taking root all those years when he had it good in Britain, in his native land. But then once he got to Ireland and he reached bottom, he hit bottom, he began to pray. And he went up this inclined plane in the spiritual life, where he began to pray more, and he began to pray more often too. And he grew deeper in his love for our Lord, and he just gave up a lot of his time to prayer, and it tuned him into God's will. And from there, he well, it's a long story. I don't know how much you want me to go into, but our Lord really did lead him on a daring escape from slavery in Ireland. He whispered to him that the ship is waiting in port, and that sounds great. God himself told me that the ship is waiting in port, but the port was 200 miles away. So Patrick had to walk there, and he walked those 200 miles, got on a ship, and then went on this amazing voyage, which he tells from his own perspective. He's semi-captive on the ship by these ruffians who took him in. But eventually he ends up back home. Once he's back home, though, he's very happy. His family is very happy to have him. And very soon after his arrival, an angel visits him. The angel's named Victorious. And Victorious has letters, he says, from the people of Ireland, and they want Patrick back. They need Patrick back. They want the gospel. And so that's why Patrick goes back. And of course, we know that the rest of the story is that he successfully converts Ireland. And that itself is one of the greatest miracles in all of history.
That's right. If you had to characterize what Ireland was like at the time, we think of this as a very Catholic place, and then there's Patrick who shows up, perhaps bringing Catholicism or converting many to Catholicism. Well, what was it like? What was Patrick dealing with when he was going through trying to convert everyone?
Well, there had been a bishop there in Ireland The Pope had assigned a bishop in Ireland, but he wasn't really an evangelizing bishop. He was there for the people who were already Christian, which included a lot of the slaves, like Patrick, who had been kidnapped and sold into labor there in Ireland. So the Patrick was a different kind of bishop, though. He wasn't a stationary bishop. Like now, all of us have a bishop somewhere, and we generally know where to find him. We know where he lives. We know where his office is. Well, Patrick was a wandering bishop like St. Paul. He would go from place to place all through Ireland, and Ireland was a pretty rough place. Most of the people, of course, were not Christians. The Christians made up a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the population. Patrick faced some hostility when he got there. Ireland was a network of warring clans. All of these little kings who fought one another in order to become eventually the high king. They were always at war with one another, always feuding, always quarreling, and there was a lot of bloodshed. It was a violent place. And he walks into this, and he very bravely faces these kings. There's one story about how he refused to bow to the kings, but he would go in and he would make the sign of the cross. The sign of the cross would neutralize the demonic magic in the magicians who were at the courts of these kings. And he would go in and he would preach the gospel, and he was remarkably effective. I'll say it again. Patrick's success in Ireland is one of the greatest miracles in Christian history.
We're talking today with Mike Aquilina about St. Patrick and his world. And of course, I'm always curious about the miracles, and there are various miracles attributed to St. Patrick, whether it be healing the sick or raising the dead even. I think there are many miracle stories that are associated with St. Patrick. How did those miracles contribute to his ability to evangelize?
Well, Patrick himself attests to certain miracles that got him through his life, because he had a lot of challenges in life. There was no guarantee he was going to survive the brutal labor that he had in Ireland. There was no guarantee he was going to get back home after he had been taken captive a couple of times. But he did. He got through all of those things, and there were a lot of close calls, and he was rescued quite often. He had encounters with angels. One of the great miracles that he himself attests is while they when he was with that shipload of ruffians who took him out of Ireland, they landed in some place. He doesn't tell us where it was. It may have been in France. They landed there, and they went ashore, and they found themselves in a wasteland. And there was no food anywhere, and they were starving. And so they began to get angry with one another and everything. But Patrick said no, and he called them to pray with him. And he prayed, and suddenly a herd of wild pigs just show up out of nowhere and overrun the place. And so obviously they see it as a miracle, as something extraordinary. They have the biggest pig roast ever. They said even the dogs on the ship were able to eat to their fill, and it's this great miracle that echoes what we see in the Bible in the story of the Exodus, where they're wandering in a wasteland. There's no food, and God provides. So we have this great miracle that sustains them, that saves their lives. And it's one that's based on a biblical model, but I believe it's true because we have the firsthand testimony from Patrick himself.
Amazing. We're talking today with Mike Aquilina about the book St. Patrick and His World, and people have all this conception of St. Patrick, and they think they know the guy. But in your research, what is the most surprising thing about St. Patrick that you find that most people don't know?
Oh boy. I think most people don't know just how rough a character he was. He was formed by the rather fantastic events that happened to him, but they involved his loneliness. He was all by himself, and so he managed in that loneliness to cultivate an interior life, a life of prayer, and that's remarkable. He came to to a phenomenal degree of self-knowledge as well, just by going inside and really examining his conscience. And he had a finely tuned conscience, and it gave him a humility that he lacked at the beginning of his life and into his teen years. He became very humble, and that's a mark of Patrick that you see all the way through. He's a rough character. He's not polished. He's not refined like St. Augustine. His writing isn't beautiful and poetic in the way Augustine's is, but he has this character that's formed by the hardships he had. Everything is on the outside with Patrick. He's not hiding anything from you. He's not trying to play tricks with his words or anything like that. He's not trying to dazzle you with rhetoric. He's just trying to tell you the truth about himself, the truth about Jesus Christ, and about the Holy Trinity. He's someone who's fiercely devoted to the Holy Trinity. That's something that we see again and again in his work. And it's actually something that's fairly unusual for that time.
And what is your hope for people who pick up this book, St. Patrick and His World?
Oh, boy, I hope they'll fall in love with St. Patrick. That's the thing. Because, again, he's such a compelling character. He's such a vivid character. And the vividness comes out in the very words he left us. We don't have a lot of words from Patrick like we have from St. Augustine or from St. Gregory of Nazianzus. We have just these two documents that are certainly from his pen, but they're beautiful. And again, they're spontaneous, they're vivid, and they're from the heart. They're so passionate that it just rings out. I have one friend who doesn't like to read them for all those reasons. He says, boy, it sounds like a teenage girl's diary. I don't feel that way at all. I feel like this is just one of these guys who's, what you see is what you get. He's just speaking from the heart, and he's laying it all there before you. He's not trying to play any games.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Mike Aquilina, for shedding some light on the incredible saint, St. Patrick and His World, available from Scepter Publications. And I wish you, Mike, a very happy St. Patrick's Day. And
the same to you and to your listeners.
God bless. That was Mike Aquilina. Check out this book. It's one of my favorites about St. Patrick. It's called St. Patrick and His World, available from Scepter Publications. And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio, check out the audio archives, or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Dr. Marc Siegel, talking to us about miracles amongst us, and Mike Aquilina, the author of St. Patrick and His World. Check out Explore with the Miracle Hunter on Saturday, March 14th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. We look at St. Patrick's Ireland. I journey across Ireland to uncover sacred sites, ancient legends, and miraculous moments where the legacy of St. Patrick continues to shape a nation's faith. I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.